All right, here we go, folks. We're going live. I am in the airport lounge in Frankfurt tonight on a layover. And so I've got to be kind of quiet. I can't talk real loud, so I hope you can hear me. If you got me, let me know in the chat. And if it needs to be louder, I can try to turn it up a little bit. But I wanted to talk about what's going on with Venezuela because there's been some developments there that are worth knowing about. And folks, one of the reasons that I do this podcast and one of the reasons I originally started this podcast is because there's so much context that goes into understanding the news, and so many times you just don't get that context because in the modern 24-hour news cycle, all they can do is show you the highlights and show you the out of the ordinary and kind of not explain to you the things you need to know to really have a good understanding of what's going on. So I try to bring you context in terms of military stuff. One of the things that journalists often get wrong is anything that has to do with the military. The culture there is so arcane and complicated that they can actually end up giving you bad information or information that's just absolutely untrue, not because of some malevolence on their part, but just because they don't understand the military. So one of the things I try to do is bring you a solid foundation with an understanding of how the military works and why they do what they do and what their capabilities are and all that sort of thing. And the other thing is just helping you kind of read between the lines, giving you that context you need, some historical background and that sort of thing that will better inform you about what's going on in the news. So that's why we're doing this. All right, so it looks like people are hearing me okay. Somebody's watching from South Pole. Really? That's amazing. Israel, Oklahoma, Texas, Maryland, St. Augustine, Florida. Do me a favor, if you haven't done so yet, post in the chat where you're watching from, so I'd like to see that. Anyway, now Nicolás Maduro just ordered a massive mobilization of forces in his country, and that coincides with the USS Gerald R showing up in the region. And so I have a photograph of the Ford I can show you. So this is what they're seeing off the coast of Venezuela at this point. They showed up with not just that ship, but two other destroyers as well. If you recall, last week, this ship was just passing through the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea, was just off the Rock of Gibraltar, and apparently they thought, well, I guess it's not coming because it hasn't moved in a while. Well, as it turns out, what they did was they turned off the transponder on this ship. By turning off the transponder, it makes it quite a bit more difficult to track a ship that's on the open sea. And that is a strategic or a tactical maneuver to try to mask where they are. It appears that they were making a beeline for Venezuela all the time. But a week ago, the pundits were saying, it looks like that Gerald R. Ford is not going to go to Venezuela now. It looks like they've just been told to never mind. Well, here it is, just off the coast of Venezuela. And that brings some serious firepower to the fight. Now, I have let's see here. I have a graphic I can show you that kind of illustrates how much firepower the United States actually has in the region right now. And that graphic would be here. Now, I'm going to go and I'm going to make this a little bit large. Well, that's probably large enough, actually. But you look here, the graphic, I think this is from Reuters, and it shows all these ships that are off the shore of the United States, off the shore of in the Caribbean, and off in the Atlantic. Look at the strike package potential here. Every one of these little looks like a little airplane. It represents a Tomahawk missile. And that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32. So 32 for each of these ships. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 32 times 7, plus the sub has some Tomahawks, and there's 2 subs there. Then we go over here to the airplanes. You see, of course, we've got what they call JSSM strike package. And look at all the bombs these things can drop. The potential air-to-surface missile capability of these planes. Then you've got MQ-9 Reapers, which are armed. You've got AC-130 Ghost Rider gunships, which are heavily armed. And those things have like a 30 millimeter chain gun and a 105 millimeter howitzer on them that can just tear things up like you can't believe. Of course, a bunch of cargo aircraft, a bunch of fighter aircraft, some attack helicopters as well. And so you're talking about serious firepower that's out there now. And a lot of people are saying, look, they wouldn't have all this firepower out there if they weren't planning on using it. Where's me? All right. They wouldn't have all this firepower out there if they weren't planning on using it. Okay, we'll have to wait and see what comes of that. Last week, President Trump was telling the media that they don't have the legal authority to strike inside Venezuela without congressional approval. Now, we'll have to see if anything changes on that, but it might. Thank you, Dwayne. Very, very kind of you there. I see that, $20. Now, I want to focus most on the steps that Nicolás Maduro and other leaders around Latin America are taking to this sudden confrontation that's building between the United States and Venezuela. First, let's start with the good news. There are several, if not many, leaders of countries in Latin America who are definitely on Trump's side in this case. The leader of Argentina, the leader of El Salvador, and the leader of Ecuador is on the side of President Trump. Take a listen to what the president of Ecuador had to say on a Spanish language Fox News interview that I translated to English for you. Take a listen.
Opinion on the situation with Nicolás Maduro and the war against the cartels that Donald Trump is now conducting in the Caribbean?
Yes, I'm in favor of the war against the cartels. We are experiencing it right here in Ecuador. No, that I live it every day, and I'm reminded of it every day. I think President Trump has a clear intention to end drug trafficking and for the product to enter the United States, and we will cooperate with President Trump's administration completely. If it's security issues, if it's drug trafficking issues, illegal mining, we will be 100% working together. Regarding Nicolás Maduro, I do not recognize him as president. I believe he is there more by force, not by something democratic. I think the president should have been, Edmundo González. And also, just a few days ago, I received an invitation from Maria Corina Machado to accompany her to receive the Nobel Prize in Oslo, and I will gladly accompany her. I think it is a moment to be together and a moment to show support.
Yes.
So he's saying a couple of things in there. One of the things he pointed out is that it's not just the drug trafficking. He said, we're 100% behind President Trump if he's going after drug trafficking, narco trafficking, and illegal mining. Now, the reason he said that is because all across Latin America, but very, very much in Venezuela and Colombia, there are huge deposits of gold. And there's been a cottage industry for decades, generations, where local families have gone gold panning in the rivers or even made their own little mine shafts, and they've extracted gold out of the mountains where they live and sold that to make a living. Now, these people don't make very much. They don't get anywhere near what the gold is actually worth when they sell it. There are very high taxes on it that the government puts on it. The government of Colombia, for example, taxes these mom and pop gold miners over 70%. So you pull out $1,000 worth of gold, you got to give 700 of that to the government. The cartels don't take quite as much, but they take their little, they call it the vacuna, which is, the vacuna is the word for vaccination, but it's just, it's a protection racket. You give us a portion of what you take out of there in gold, and we won't kill you and your family. That's basically what they're talking about. So the thing about this that people don't understand is that many of these drug cartels that are growing and processing and trafficking cocaine, marijuana, whatever, even methamphetamines out of Colombia and Venezuela, they actually make more money on the illegal gold trade than they do off drugs. So I've done quite a bit of reporting on this, and I've gone up in the mountains of Colombia and interviewed some of these miners and learned all of this. But it's mind-boggling how much money the cartels are making from illegal mining. And they're not just going around and taking the gold from these mom and pop, artisanal gold mines. They are bringing heavy machinery out into the jungle, clear-cutting the jungle. They take huge water hoses, but they bring in big pumps, and they blast the mud away to get at the gold, and filter it all through like a sieve so that they can find the gold that's in it. It causes tremendous environmental damage to the rainforests and stuff in Venezuela and Colombia. And look, the government is either directly or indirectly profiting off of that. The government of Colombia, the government of Venezuela. By some estimates, if the drug trade completely went away, if the cartels completely went away and all the illegal mining and everything just went away tomorrow, Colombia's economy would contract by about 40%. That's how much all of this illegal activity contributes to the GDP in Colombia. Now, that's an old number. It might be more than that now. It might be less than that now. But that's the last number that I saw. The long and the short of it is, it's no wonder that President Petro in Colombia, is really up in arms about these threats against Venezuela. Number one, he's a communist, and so he likes Nicolás Maduro. They get along really well. President Petro was heavily involved way back when with the illegal militias in Colombia. His policies toward them have been very, very weak. They've not done much to try to take out like the FARC and the ELN and all that. So there's still a tremendous amount of violence in Colombia because of that. Gustavo Petro has been very, so incredibly negative against President Trump that he got his visa revoked to the United States when he went to the UN General Assembly And that was for going out in the street in New York City and chanting with protesters to have President Trump removed from power. Let me just stop right there. I mean, just imagine that. The president of a foreign nation comes into the United States, stands on American soil, grabs a bullhorn, and starts shouting along with protesters to have Trump impeached and removed. So it's no surprise that they PNG'd him. PNG means persona non grata, like he can't come back to the United States. And so he's only gotten more belligerent since then. Thank you, Daryl, for the Canadian, is that Canadian, $50? I appreciate it. Thank you. So Gustavo Petro has been extremely critical of President Trump, and now he's gone so far as to say that he's going to, President Trump already said, we're cutting all aid to Colombia. Well, then we're going to cut all of our information sharing with the United States. So let's get into what that entails, because this is where it gets interesting. Where's my notes? So the United States in this century, since 2000, has given Colombia about $10 billion. All right. Now, some of that was to just in humanitarian aid. Some of it was to help the government of Colombia better fight the cartels. Obviously, that's a win for everybody. We all want the cartels to, go away. Help them even go so far as spraying the coca crops that were being grown out in the mountains of Colombia. And we provided them with military hardware and training. And you have no idea how deep the U.S.-Colombian intelligence pipeline goes. So before all this came to a head, we had like 4 main channels in Colombia that were providing us with very important real-time information about the drug trafficking that was coming out of Colombia. Here's what we did. We established a joint interagency task force south, which gives real-time radar and satellite tracking, and then actually we have some AI programs and stuff that help to queue up the targets and identify targets and say, these are the targets we need to be hitting next. Then we built a combined operations center called SIMCOM in Cartagena, Colombia. And by doing that, we actually sent our advisors down there. This is owned and run by the Colombian Navy, but it was paid for in large part by the United States. And it draws in intelligence from many different sources, especially signals intelligence that's drawn in from either aircraft or ground stations. So the United States actually paid to establish a whole bunch of radar stations all along the coast of Colombia to be able to better track drug boats that were coming and going from their coast. And those things are still there. But so the SIMCON would take all that information and kind of aggregate it in one place and help the DEA or the U.S. military or whatever to find, fix, and then turn over targets to the Colombian military or police for them to go take out. So one of the things the United States does is it always wants to put a local face on any of these programs. So you don't see a bunch of U.S. troops that are going out and taking down boats or drug labs or anything like that. What you see are Colombian forces doing that. But if you dig into it a little bit, you find out that it was actually the United States that gave them the information that they needed to go find the bad guys. and gave him the training and gave him much of the equipment and all of that. So we've had a very close relationship with the Colombian military and police forces for many years. And I've been down there on some of that joint training between U.S. Special Forces and Colombian Special Forces and things like that. I have some footage of that. I'm going to turn that down a little bit. This is combined training between the United States and Colombian forces. You can see there, it's, serious training. This is not playing around. And what they're training to do is to, oh my gosh, they got a girl in there screeching away. I can't take that. So what they're doing is they're training to target cartels, because Colombia is not at war with anybody except the cartels that are within their own borders. So this is the kind of, firefights and things that they have. You notice that guy's got a blank adapter on his weapon. Let's see if it goes back to him here. These are some of those females that should not be involved in infantry stuff. So you look on the tip of his weapon, see the red thing on the front of his weapon there? That's a blank adapter. So he's not shooting live ammunition, he's shooting blanks. The reason they put the blank adapter on there is because it helps the blank charge to push back the bolt in the weapon. So somebody's asking, let's see here, let's get rid of this. What are the eggs for? Well, it's a simulated drug, compound or something that they're taking over. And very often they'll pay somebody, hey, we'll pay you $300 and we want to use your farm for this training. And so it's not surprising you'd see chickens running around or dogs barking or, whatever. When they're doing training like this. So that's not a huge deal. So what President Petro said today was that they are no longer going to share that information with the United States. They're not going to take all of that aggregated SIGINT data and share it with the U.S. The thing is, it goes both ways, because President Trump last week or 2 weeks ago told President Petro, don't come back to the United States and we're not going to give you any more money. Well, the way that they collect most of that information that they share with the United States is with stuff that's funded by the United States. So it's kind of a, it's kind of a fake political theater stunt that Petro is pulling here by saying that he's not going to share information with the United States anymore, because the U.S. has already quit paying them, or paying for the collection of the information. We're not buying the information from Colombia. We are paying for the apparatus, for the equipment that Colombia uses to collect that information. So it's not like all of that's going to stop working right away, but it is kind of just political theater on the part of Gustavo Petro. Now, it's also political theater that Nicolás Maduro is using this as an opportunity to mobilize hundreds of thousands of troops. He's taking the country onto a war footing. He's taking them into a complete mobilization here. And I'm going to explain more about that, what that means in just a second, but listen to what he had to say when he did it.
To be prepared, if it were our turn as a republic, as a people, go to armed struggle to defend this sacred heritage of the liberators, be ready to win, to triumph through the path of patriotism and bravery. So I proceed to sign, to put into effect the law for the creation of the comprehensive defense commands at the national level.
Here he is signing the document.
Signed, approved, endorsed today, Tuesday, November 11th.
Of the year 2025, and I say with the whole country, peace, peace, peace. We want peace, we will have it under maximum pressure, maximum preparation. Execute this law immediately.
Okay, so that's his big blustery announcement that he's signing into law a change in the way that governance is done in Venezuela. What he's doing is he's establishing these, like, let's call them territorial guards, okay, in every state in Venezuela. And he's essentially using this as an opportunity to consolidate more power to himself, because these new territorial guards are going to be sort of superimposed on top of local governance in a way that essentially militarizes the entire country of Venezuela. Now, you and I both know President Trump is very unlikely to order a ground invasion of Venezuela. That is just not going to happen. They're not going to do that. And so what would happen would be striking at drug routes, striking at cartel hideouts, drug labs, maybe some government buildings. And in order to hit all those things, they're going to have to hit some military targets, like these ones here. This is, I got to turn that off because it's got music. This was a sizzle reel that was put out by the FANB, which is the military of Venezuela, showing all their weapons getting moved around. They're moving weapons all over the place and getting them prepared. There's, like I said, essentially militarizing the entire country at this point, preparing for like some major battle. Now, I kind of find it hard to believe that they really think that the United States is going to invade with a bunch of Marines or something. But I guess they're just figuring better safe than sorry, and so we're going to get all prepared for this. Now, they know, and we know, and everybody knows that even if they are fully mobilized, the Venezuelan military is not going to stand a chance against the United States military. So that's not why they're doing this. They're not trying to set themselves up for a long-term insurgency against the United States or something. What they're doing is they're playing to the cameras for their own people, and that's why they're putting out these sizzle videos on local television in Venezuela. They're trying to whip up the militaristic fervor of the people in Venezuela, get them more on the side of President Maduro, and President Maduro is expanding his power by the use of the military to give himself more autonomy, more authority across the country. Now, if you look at what Venezuelans themselves are posting on social media, most of it is like a giant welcome sign to President Trump. I saw one today that was a meme somebody had made of a squirrel going like this, and it said, "Oh, please hurry up and strike for the love of God." So there are plenty of Venezuelans who don't like Maduro, would love it if Maduro was deposed and the rightful president was allowed to come and rule. And as I've said before, I believe if that were to happen, it's going to happen by pushing Maduro out. And when that happens, the military is going to line up under the rightful president. There'll be some guys at the top that'll probably get lynched or stoned or something. But for the most part, your rank and file members of the military are going to be very happy that Maduro's gone. Nobody's really going to lament his leaving. Now, I think that the United States, and what they're doing here, is a lot of people, that's the big question. Like, why in the world would the U.S. bring so much military force to bear. This is the largest buildup of the U.S. military since the Iraq War. And so there's just people going like, why is he doing this? What is the point here? I mean, obviously this is not just President Trump trying to take out some drug boats. What this is doing is it is cutting off the funding for not just Maduro, but for Gustavo Petro as well. Colombia has been an ally of ours for many years, but I think President Trump sees that Gustavo Petro, the current president of Colombia, is not a friend to the United States. So we need to clamp down on Colombia every bit as much as we need to clamp down on Venezuela. And Colombia is making it easier for us to do that by being all belligerent against President Trump. So what we're seeing play out here is a maximum pressure campaign on Nicolás Maduro to try to get him to step down and leave. Nicolás Maduro is using that as an opportunity to try to improve his image with his own people and consolidate more power to himself. The Colombian president has talked about, we need to form a coalition of willing countries in Latin America to counter President Trump's extrajudicial killings. He's calling all these drug boats that are getting blown up in international waters extrajudicial killings. Well, there's a lot of noise being made about that in the media. President Trump doesn't have the right to do this. And the way President Trump's team is couching this to try to come up with a legal justification for what they're doing is to say this is an armed conflict with an other than without being an armed conflict with a sovereign state. We're at we're at armed conflict with these cartels. And everybody on the left points out, but the cartels are not shooting at us, so it's not armed conflict. And the Trump administration is saying, we're making a distinction that if you're bringing poison into the United States that is killing Americans, we're going to treat that the same as if you were lobbing missiles at America and killing Americans. And that's the right way to look at it, in my opinion. We have to get out of the outdated mindset that the only thing that constitutes an act of war is if some other country airdrops troops onto our country, Red Dawn style, or shoots a ballistic missile or something at the United States or anything like that. We need to start making it clear that if you are taking actions that are causing Americans to die, either by, China is really bad about this. They send the precursor chemicals for fentanyl into Mexico. It gets refined into fentanyl, sent into the United States, kills tens of thousands of Americans every year. So obviously that's a big problem. But that's an asymmetric warfare method. But we need to call it warfare. This is why my friend Ryan Macbeth keeps talking about we need to start dropping warheads on foreheads for international scammers and people who are finding ways to steal money from Americans. Because here's the thing, this asymmetric warfare expands into the cyber realm. But the United States laws have not kept up with that. So we don't really know who has jurisdiction over the internet. So if there's a Nigerian scammer that's using a VPN in Russia to steal money from a little old lady in Augusta, Georgia, what does the little old lady do? Call the police in Augusta, Georgia? They can't do anything about that. It's not going to help to call the police in Russia or in Nigeria for that matter. Although Nigeria might actually try to do something about it, according to what they told me when I was there. But who has jurisdiction over these crimes? The victims have no recourse because there is no modern way that law enforcement knows to deal with these kinds of issues. So President Trump is trying to move the ball forward to make America safer by saying, no, we're going to classify these acts as acts of war, and so we are going to respond accordingly. So far, they've struck about 20 go-fast boats in the Caribbean and in the Pacific. They've killed about 75 people. Listen to me. Every one of those that they've released the footage is definitely a drug smuggling boat. None of those are fishing boats. One of the things that I think a lot of politicians like Rand Paul don't understand are that they're saying these drug boats, they're not coming to the United States, they're just going to Trinidad. Well, no, they're not going to Trinidad, because I was just in Trinidad and I was told, no, they're not coming here. There are no international waters between Trinidad and Venezuela. So these boats have got to be beyond the line of sight. There, from what I can tell, has not been one strike yet that was actually visible from the shore. So if these boats are 100 plus miles offshore, going very quickly to the north with boats full of drugs, well, then under the laws of self-defense, this is the case the Trump administration is making, we should be able to drop bombs on these guys in international waters. If they do that right off the coast of Venezuela, then they get into more legal problems, and that's where we are right now. So we're going to have to wait and see if this thing goes any further. This is some pretty serious posturing if that's all that President Trump is doing by moving all these troops in there. Now, I saw where somebody was asking about the, well, let's just get to the questions, and I'll answer your questions here. We'll start with this one. Do you think communist China controls the Democratic Party and Russia now infiltrating the right in a scissor strategy? Russia and China are allied on the communist bloc. Well, I don't know about that, but what I do know for sure is that China, Russia, Qatar, Iran are all working very hard to stir up dissension and division in the United States, and largely they're being successful at that. So it's something we need to be on the lookout for. Bruce Clark says, any idea if there's a contingent of Wagner advising Venezuela military? There's been rumors that Wagner Group was in Venezuela. The only time I know that they were there was, I think, 2014 or I don't remember the year. What I do know is that Nicolás Maduro is not using his own forces for his own close protection. Maduro uses Cuban and sometimes Russian mercenaries, essentially, as his close protection detail, because he can't trust his own people. He doesn't trust his military at all. Nor should he, because, I mean, really, that's those guys, many of them would be very happy to see Maduro leave. Cynthia says, would the USA send the ships just for a show? Well, it's possible. President Trump might do that. Thank you, babe. It's possible President Trump might send them just for show, but as everybody is saying, this is a really serious, I mean, you don't send to make a show of force. We didn't send 150,000 troops to Iraq back in 2003 just as a political move. You send that many troops, you're going to do something with them. Now, somebody said, am I in Frankfurt, Germany? Yes, I am. I'm at the airport in Frankfurt on a layover, getting ready to go to Armenia. Arnold Floyd said, where did the term beeline come from actually mean? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Kayla, I'm the prophetess of Yahweh living in Trinidad. What is America planning? Well, keep listening. If you're a prophetess, why don't you tell us? Isn't there a pretty big actual cost? Okay, this is the question I was looking for. Nicolás Dupree is asking about the cost to keep moving around so much military hardware. Well, you would think, and it certainly isn't free, but keep in mind that these ships are going to be somewhere, and they're going to have men on them, and they're going to be doing training, and they're going to be doing their thing all the time. So for them to move to another part of the globe and continue doing what they've been doing, really, there's not a lot of incremental cost for the United States. They got some gas, some fuel costs to get to Southcom AOR, but that's about it. Other than that, those are costs that are already sunk costs. I mean, they're already baked into the cake. So not really. What's the vote count for congressional approval actually mean? 50, 75% for act of war. So in order to go to war, I don't know if they need a supermajority or not, but we've got 100 senators, so we need at least 51 to vote on something like that. There's 435 delegates in the Congress that have to get over 50%. So yeah, I think it's Congress, not the Senate, that would do that. Chuck, would you please give us a update on the Russia-Ukraine war? I will next week because I'm going to be going to Ukraine. I've already got the trip lined up, and we're going to be going out to the front lines. And so stay tuned, Harrison. I will be in Ukraine reporting live from there very soon. We're getting it all put together. It's going to be a good trip. A quick trip, but it'll be a good trip. Chile is on which side? I think Chile is a more capitalist. They're not Chavista. So I might be wrong about that, but I think Chile is. The last time I was there, I got the sense that they were a more right-wing government out there. So it's a good question. Greg Moyer says, do you think that Trump is trying to provoke an attack from Venezuela to have an excuse to get approval from Congress? No, Venezuela is not going to attack the United States. They're not going to attack U.S. forces out there. They know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they will lose. They don't really even have the capability to attack us right now. They have some anti-ship missiles and things like that, but those missiles are like line of sight. So the U.S. presence that's off the coast of Caracas is not close enough to be seen from the coast of Caracas. You're not going to see the ships out there. And if they can't see them, Venezuela doesn't really have anything that can hit them. Now, they put out this video. These are GRAD multiple launch rocket systems. What I want to point out here is that these systems are old Soviet technology. It's the kind of thing you see in Ukraine a lot. They were built during the Soviet Union. They are these are not in any way, shape, or form precision-guided munitions. The missiles that are on the back, they can put different kinds of missiles in those tubes right there, but the long and the short of it is they're all dome bombs, and they just fly in a certain direction. So it's not like they're going to be launching those things at U.S. ships or anything like that. And they don't have the range to go far enough to hit the ships, much less to get to the United States or anything like that. Now, they probably have some drones that could reach where the ships are out there, but like I say, they're just not dumb enough to attack the United States. President Maduro keeps shouting he wants peace, 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 peace. When he says it, you can tell he's almost desperate. He's just like, peace, please, please, we want peace. Like, please don't hurt me. So at the same time, he's taken advantage of this, as I said, to consolidate power. So there's that. Where is Chuck? And his poor voice needs a cup of tea. My wife just brought me a cup of tea. Thank you. I'm talking very quietly because I'm in the club at the airport in Frankfurt on a layover. So we just flew 10 hours from, well, we went Panama to Costa Rica and then Costa Rica to Frankfurt so that we could miss going through the United States with all the craziness that's going on there. We could do a whole podcast on the insane craziness of the travel for Thanksgiving season. Holy smokes, it's going to be lit in the United States. So I didn't want to go through the U.S., so this time flying over here, we went through Costa Rica, now Frankfurt, and then we go from here to Yerevan. It's a good 24 hours of travel at least. Question, the USS Gerald R was just off the coast of Iran. Well, they were in the Mediterranean, so they were more off the coast of Israel than off the coast of Iran. And it took them about 2 weeks, but they've now made it into what they call the Area of Responsibility, the AOR, for the Southcom. Okay. Fernley, Nevada, one of my favorite places. Barbara says, what do you think of America telling Israel what they should do with terrorists stuck in the tunnels? I think Israel should just say, we're going to do what we need to do with those guys and not listen to President Trump on that. Aside from stopping the flow of drugs and immigrants, what interest does the U.S. have in Venezuela? Look, this is as much a flex against China and Russia as it is against Venezuela. Venezuela has been developed by China and Russia and Iran over the past 20 years to become something of a proxy in the Western Hemisphere for those countries. So this is much more of a pushback against Russia and China than it is against Venezuela directly. Now, also, Venezuela has sent 8 million migrants, they're fleeing from their country. Many of them have gone to Colombia. Some of them have come to the United States. There's about 600,000 of them in the United States. If we were to get rid of Maduro and put a democratically elected president in his place, a lot of those people would voluntarily return home. It would help President Trump's efforts to clean out the illegal migrants from the United States. So there's that. A lot of people say this is about oil, and I keep pointing out it's not about oil. We got all the oil we need. We don't need Venezuela's oil. We don't even want Venezuela's oil because it's very dirty, very heavy, very hard to extract, and they're not able to pull enough of it out of the ground to really make a dent in what we need anyway. If a new president comes into Venezuela, they will probably rapidly modernize their oil drilling capabilities, and they would be a better ally for the United States if we so chose. But right now, the U.S. doesn't need what they have. So it's not about oil. I thought they were going after those 100-mile-per-hour fish. Yeah, okay. Chuck, couldn't this be done without making Maduro look like a hero? Maybe not. That's a good question. But anytime, this is just very, very common. When a country goes to war, the leader of that country gets a boost in the polls. Always. Oh, it's just how it works. People rally around their leader in times of crisis. And of course, people on the left believe you should never waste a good crisis. And so Nicolás Maduro is not wasting this crisis. He's trying to use it to bolster his own support. He knows he's hated. He knows a lot of people hate him. Arnold says, so can we take him out because he's not an actual president? I've made that case before. The U.S. has a policy that we don't assassinate leaders of countries, but this guy is not the democratically elected leader of the country. He's just an interloper that stayed and needs to go. So maybe. That's a very good point. Micah Coleman says, is it safe to say the military has had actionable intel on these drug runners for a long time and administrators have intentionally turned a blind eye until now? Yes. And a lot of that intel, what I was pointing out today, came out of Colombia. It was a joint operation between the Colombians and the United States, with equipment provided by the U.S., manpower provided by Colombia, to track what they saw, find, fix, and finish these targets. In this case, the finishing of them was done by Colombians, was not really done against Venezuela. So one of the ways that Colombia stayed on our good side, even though Colombia sends more drugs to the United States than Venezuela does, was that the Colombian government was working with us to try to put a stop to that in big ways, billions of dollars a year. And now they're not. So we still have some capability to gather our own intel, but we're not going to have as good of intel as we had when Colombia was our ally. Now that the Colombian president is making himself our adversary, then we're going to have to see what the United States decides to do against Colombia. And the Colombia, if we turn Caracas into Gaza, Colombia might take a look at that and say, maybe we need to vote for somebody else. Elections are coming up in Colombia next year in, I think, March or May. And so if they vote in a more conservative guy, which it looks like they're set to do, then a lot of this stuff gets turned back on. And we don't have the problems with Colombia that we have right now. So we can hope. Do you think this is just about drug flow? No, I don't, as I explained. Do you like Pete Hegseth? Yes, I do. Pete Hegseth is a good leader. Pete Hegseth understands what the military needs. Pete Hegseth, the only thing I criticize him on is that he is far too much a sycophant for President Trump. So he won't tell President Trump, hey, that's stupid, we shouldn't do that. Because if he did, he'd get fired. He understands that if you're going to work for President Trump, you have to be a Trump sycophant. And to me, that's kind of icky, meaning you have to just be a yes man and just nod along with whatever President Trump does. We're going to attack Nigeria. Oh, okay. Yes, sir. Absolutely. 3 bags full, sir. Instead of going, wait, no, what? Nigeria is not the enemy. The enemy is being fought by the Nigerian forces. Nigeria is working with us to defeat the enemy in Nigeria. So, Mr. President, we shouldn't be attacking Nigeria, the Nigerian government. We're just making the same thing with the Panama Canal deal. Panama was an ally, was a friend. The new president that Panama has, President Molino, was a staunch supporter of President Trump and actually was a Trump-like figure in Panama to some extent. And President Trump, one of the first things he does out of the gate, said, we're going to take over the Panama Canal. It's all Panama's fault. Well, look, there were some things to be upset about at Panama about, but they could have just as easily just gone down and had a meeting with Molino and said, hey, we're concerned about this. Will you fix it? And he would have fixed it. But instead, we all had to jump on board. So I ran into Pete Hegseth when he came to Panama, and I talked to him for a minute in the hotel lobby. And I'm very impressed with Pete Hegseth. Now, I knew him from when he worked at Fox, because I worked at Fox for about 6 years with Oliver North, and so I'd run across Hegseth a couple other times. Hegseth is a devout Christian. He's a godly man. He is very capable at what he's doing. A lot of people say, well, he's not qualified to lead a bunch of generals that have been in the military for 40 years, and all he was a captain. I don't think we want somebody that comes from inside that system to lead. I think we definitely wanted somebody from outside. Hegseth's been to combat. He's led men in combat. He's got an Ivy League education. He's not a dummy. And he has a very strong force of will, of strong presence to make things happen in the military. And I'm very happy with the way he's been reorganizing the military. Why was Al-Qaeda butcher of Syria permitted in the Oval Office? Well, you must have missed yesterday's live, Mrs. E. You can go watch yesterday's live, and I talked all about that. Diane says, can you please post and share that firepower poster? I'm not sure which firepower poster you're talking about. Oh, I know. You're talking about the one, you're talking about this one? Yeah, I'll post that over on Locals. Okay? So, sure, I'll do that. Nathan, could you make a note, please, to maybe see if Rubina could post that thing over on Locals? Is Oscar going with you to Ukraine? I don't think he is, because he's having a hard time getting a visa. Because he's a Mexican citizen, he's got to get a visa to get into Ukraine, and he's having a hard time with that. So I don't think he's going to make it. But my son Nathan is going with me as my cameraman, so we'll be over there soon. Have you had any updates from the Jewish kids you helped last year at Christmas? Have they been forced from their homes again with the recent shelling? No, they went back home to Kiryat Shimona. School started back up again, and they're getting back to normal life. There have not been any shelling incidents across the northern border for many months, or at least very, 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 very few incidents. So they're in better shape now than they were in even before the war started. So they're doing well. Joe Boy says, what do you suppose those peaceful traffickers would do if law enforcement attempted to inspect their cargo? They'd throw their cargo overboard, is what they typically do. Thank you, Micah. Appreciate that. Very kind. Mike Silva says, what's your favorite place to travel to? I always answer that question by saying the next one. I like going to places that I haven't been yet. And there are increasingly fewer and fewer places I haven't been. But like this year, Nathan and I got to go to Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. That was pretty cool. We had a good time there. We're going to go to Croatia next year, Connie and I. So I'm looking forward to that. The place that I like to go the most that I've already been to is Armenia. Listen, if you haven't been to Armenia, folks, you're missing out. It ought to be on everybody's bucket list. And this is from somebody who's been to some of the finest places on planet Earth. Armenia has a lot to offer, and we love Armenia. To say nothing, in fact, I've got grandkids there now. Michael says, why does the government of Colombia Gustavo Petro back Maduro? Because he's a communist. Cheryl Miller says, your answer discussing leaders being bolstered during war. Do you think this potential war with Venezuela is helping or hurting President Trump? That's a good question. I don't know if I'm a good judge of that. I try to take a real neutral outlook on President Trump, even though I like a lot of the things he's doing. I voted for him, but I think there's a certain segment of his base that is all in on what he's doing. The problem is the MAGA movement is sort of fracturing. And some of that is, I believe, a direct result of the meddling that Russia and China have done in our process. But there is a big schism developing in the conservative movement as a whole. Some of these people, and being led by guys like Tucker Carlson, people like Candace Owens, and it is making it more difficult to judge how President Trump is doing. And I think having al-Shara in the Oval Office yesterday was a big faux pas for him, because it seems like all of his supporters are unhappy with that. I haven't seen a whole lot of people that are cheering President Trump on for having a known terrorist in the White House. Nomad says, would Trump risk attacking a Jew in Guyana, which would put America under the Genesis 12:3 curse? A Jew in Guyana. Trump's not attacking anybody in Guyana. Actually, the United States is helping to protect Guyana. So Nathan says my microphone's really blown out. I'm going to turn my microphone down some. President Trump's not going to attack Guyana. Don't worry about that. Okay. I'm going to end it there. We're just about an hour, and I've got a plane to catch. So stay tuned, folks. Tomorrow I'll be coming to you from Armenia. And we'll have an update for you on what's going on over there, and we'll talk about whatever else is happening in the world. But keep an eye on Venezuela. No question, it is not over down there yet. So it's very likely that we will see some sort of strikes on Venezuela in the coming days. So stay tuned. All right, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate all of you. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.